We just want to start with one, change of one, a lot like the biblical discipleship model, 1 to 2 to 3, and then multiply from there. And so if you look just at sheer numbers of orphans in the state of Tennessee and churches, it would take one family out of every church in the state of Tennessee. If they took in one child, there would be no more in the foster care system in the state.
Mid-South Viewpoint, a Christian news and information feature of Bott Radio Network 640 AM, discussing the news, views, issues, and concerns that affect our community. Join us now for today's edition of Mid-South Viewpoint.
Scripture tells us to defend the cause of the fatherless. Hi, and welcome to Mid-South Viewpoint. I'm Byron Tyler. Today we're going to focus on orphans, adoption, and ministry. Here is One Less Ministries. Matt Nason is the foster care director for One Less. So Matt, hi, and welcome to Mid-South Viewpoint.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
How long have you been the foster care director at One Less Ministries?
Since the beginning of June. It hasn't been that long.
Okay. Tell me your journey toward this position.
Oh, gosh. That could take a long time. My wife and I were looking at doing more than we currently do as foster parents. We were looking at starting a nonprofit organization, and we got set up through some connections through college and some other people. We noticed there was a couple that started the organization One Less Ministries out of Smyrna, which is just between Nashville and Murfreesboro. So we kind of talked to them. They were looking to expand to Memphis. They had started out doing human trafficking, doing some awareness and advocacy for that, as well as more around that. And then realized that almost 80% of the kids that were trafficked once they were rescued either came from foster care or went back into foster care because they didn't have anywhere to go. They wanted to expand instead of just human trafficking and sexual exploitation to foster care. So that's where my wife and I's experience was at. We were looking at doing the same thing, so we kind of joined forces, and I came on to work for them because it was something I was already doing here, and they were wanting to expand to Memphis. So we were already here, and it kind of seemed like a good fit, because trying to get somebody to move to Memphis, if you live outside Memphis, well, we know what that's like. So,
But once you're here, you love it.
I love it. I've lived here almost my whole life except for going to college, and I love it. So it just kind of worked out. So I came on as the West Tennessee foster care director. We also have one Middle Tennessee that kind of handles the same thing that I do here, they do there.
Now, when you mentioned foster care and human trafficking, I know a lot of times we think of human trafficking outside the U.S., and I know it happens here, but we talk in the connection with foster care.
Yeah. What happens is a lot of times here in the U.S., people aren't kidnapped, like pull up in the car, throw them in the car. They're more coerced. Well, a lot of times that comes from somebody who's very vulnerable and is looking for acceptance and promise of a job and things like that. And foster kids are the most vulnerable usually because sometimes they've been bounced around from one home to the other and they feel like they don't belong. And so when someone promises them that, they're willing to go, and next thing they know, they don't know where they're at. So if we can engage and mobilize churches, which is kind of my main role, to be involved more in foster care with the Department of Children's Services, because I work with them a lot, then hopefully if we can get these kids into a loving, Christ-centered home, they'll be able to feel that acceptance and realize that somebody loves them and not be as vulnerable to be trafficked. What we do on the foster care side is really preventative for the human trafficking also. So they do tie in, and that's kind of why we decided if we could get involved on the foster care level, maybe we can cut down a little bit on the human trafficking side.
Well, one of your advocates is in the studio with us right now. Amanda Price, a friend of mine, she and her husband Mark recently adopted a beautiful young little boy, Noah. He's here. He's actually here. Last time we were on the program, we talked about the quest to go to China, the prayers waiting for the government and all of the bureaucracy and the paperwork and the things to happen. Noah's a reality.
2 years worth. That's
2 years
right.
of waiting. Well, tell me about it.
Yeah, we went to Hong Kong in June. We were there for a week, and everything that took 2 years to get done just came to fruition in that week, and it totally erased all of the angst that I suffered the whole 2-year process. And he's been home and has acclimated so well. From the time that I brought him home, my heart has broken for orphans all through the entire adoption process. So I knew that I needed to do more than just bring him home, and that was it.
And Amanda, Mary, your oldest daughter, is in college right now.
Yes, and then we have one that's a senior in high school, a 6th grader, and a 1st grader as well, Noah.
And Noah.
Preschool.
Preschool. And not only was he an international adoption, but it was a special needs adoption.
Yes, he has Down syndrome. When we brought him home, the first priority that we had was to take him to the Down syndrome clinic at Vanderbilt to get him a full physical. And when we went there, he was seen by about 7 different specialists. It was a wonderful experience. They gave him a perfect bill of health, said he would live into his 80s. So we have hit the ground running with Noah. And like I said, he's a very bright child. He's acclimated well. He loves school, loves learning, and he has picked up very quickly.
Talk about the beginning for adoption for you and Mark. After you would think your family was completed. Not yet, but there was something that was in your hearts that stirred that caused you to search out for Noah.
Well, as I had mentioned to you, a year ago or so, it started with Mark's dream to get the camp going. And during that week of camp...
And the camp we're talking about is Camp Barnabas, was a special needs camp, and that has actually exploded into some new horizons that we're going to be talking about in some future programs. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just kind of want to bring listeners in on where we are when we talk about the camp.
Sure. So the camp was really my first experience with spending quality time with people with disabilities, special needs. So I got to spend a lot of time with children that had Down syndrome, and I fell in love. When we left camp that week, Mark and I both agreed that we could be a parent of a child with Down syndrome. And how were we going to get that done? So Bethany Christian Services had come to our church and had talked about foster care and talked about adoption, and Mark and I both almost simultaneously agreed that that's the decision that we needed to make. And so the process started with that phone call to Bethany, and we want to adopt a child with Down syndrome, and what does that look like and how do you do it? And 2 years later, we have our child, and we are not done yet.
You're not done yet?
No. God's still burning a desire in our hearts for orphan care, possibly foster care, maybe adopting another child. We don't really know what it looks like, but I am sold out for orphan care and orphan care awareness.
And what's been the adjustment like for your natural birth children?
Well, honestly, I thought there would be a little jealousy issues. I thought there would be a little bit of, separation anxiety from us. And Noah came into our family, and the kids just took right to him. Ashton went with us to Hong Kong, so that was a great decision that our social worker suggested to us, because they established a relationship there in Hong Kong. And so when we came home, even though he was a little bit nervous about meeting the rest of the family, he had Ashton to cling to for a little bit until he met Sarah and Jake, and then he was all about them too. And so it was obviously God breathed from the get-go, because Noah has just come into our family as if he has always been in our family. And that's kind of hard for an older child. He's 5.5 years old, so you would think that there'd be some attachment disorders and things, and there wasn't for him. It's like he was always meant to be with us, and God prepared his heart, and God prepared the hearts of our children and our even extended family. Everybody has just welcomed him in as if it was always meant to be, and he's always been with us.
Matt, how typical is the Price family scenario to adoption?
Fairly typical. A lot of times you'll see, especially with an international adoption, a lot of families don't realize a lot of stuff that's going to happen when they get home. They don't realize that there may be attachment disorders dealing with other kids. Sometimes you don't see them right off, but a lot of times you do. Just with a lot of things that go on, you deal with, Amanda, we're talking earlier, like what they like to eat. Noah wouldn't eat anything he didn't recognize for the first week. She's like, we just ate rice the first week,
Is that what happened? Give me some examples.
We were visiting a lot of Chinese restaurants that specifically serve dim sum, because that's the staple food in Hong Kong. So we ate a lot of dim sum and a lot of rice, and if he wouldn't eat what I put on the plate, if I mixed it with rice, he ate it. So that's how I got food down him. But now I've noticed, I was telling Matt that we went to a Chinese restaurant just last week, ordered the same stuff I always order, and he wouldn't eat it. He was eating the beef and broccoli that my son had ordered. That's the typical American Chinese.
Has he welcomed Happy Meals yet?
Oh, yes. Oh, and Chick-fil-A, he is obsessed. And now he'll eat mac and cheese, pizza. We've taken him to the Mexican restaurant, which we think that's kind of funny to see a Chinese child like tearing up quesadillas is kind of funny to me.
Yeah. And so a lot of times you see some of that stuff, and even language barriers sometimes. A lot of people, when they start their adoption or their foster care process, sometimes it can be a couple years, before they bring a child home. Sometimes with foster care, it's just a few months going through your PATH training. But a lot of people get frustrated and think that's the hard part, and it's really the easy part. Once you bring a child home and try and accept them and love them, which isn't as hard for us to do as parents as it is for the children to understand, just because of what they've been through and some of the trauma and loss that they go through, actually changes the way their brain works, like the actual chemistry of their brain. And there's 6 major risk factors for that, and 4 of them are prenatal. So a lot of people think that, hey, like my little girl we have in foster care right now, we picked her up from the hospital 5 days old. In a situation like that, most people think, well, they're going to be a healthy child because we've had them from birth. They weren't abused physically, sexually, mentally, emotionally, none of that. And so they're going to be all right. But 4 of those 6 risk factors are prenatal. And so that's still something that you have to be aware of and mindful of. But like with their cases, that's awesome that Noah's integrated very well. From what they can tell, it's a good story.
Now,
I'm glad to hear that.
I will say that I think part of why Noah has acclimated so well is because there is a foster care system in Hong Kong very similar to the way we have a foster care system here. And he was attached and he was loved by a foster family. So I am so grateful that's how they do their orphan system in Hong Kong, because a lot of the attachment disorders and things that you have to ride through are the children that were raised in institutions and orphanages and things like that. Thankfully, we didn't have that issue with Noah.
That's really good.
Now, the difference with foster care and adoption, in the Price's situation, they actually adopted Noah. Now, with foster care, I guess sometimes it could turn into a parent maybe adopting that child.
Correct. We actually have 2 children right now through foster care. One has been officially adopted, Braden. He was adopted August 19th, so almost 2 months ago. So we were glad that was done. He's now our son, and they're both from right here in Memphis. The little girl we have, she's still in foster care, so she will remain unnamed on the radio. But yes, with that, you welcome a child into your home knowing that there might be an opportunity for them to be reunified with their family, which the Department of Children's Services will make no bones about it. That's their ultimate goal in the beginning, most of the time. After a while, if that tends to not be the case, they will kind of move towards an adoption, trying to identify a family.
And what are some of the determining factors there?
A lot of it is whether or not the parents are incarcerated. Sometimes, like if both parents are incarcerated for 4 or 5 years, they're probably going to try to have that child adopted instead of being a long-term thing there in foster care. Some kids stay in foster care for a long time because they may not have a family that is willing to adopt them at that point. But sometimes these children will go back home. And so that is our job, especially as Christians, is to love these kids the time that we have them and show them Christ's love that he showed us in that time, whether it be 1 week, 1 month, 1 year. And it's hard to say goodbye sometimes if they have to go back home. And a lot of times you hear people say, well, I wouldn't be able to do that. But that's part of what it is, and what these kids need is a loving family, even if it is for a short amount of time. Because, that's what somebody did for us. So obviously, I'm a firm believer that we should do that, even if it is hard. The Scripture doesn't tell us to care for the children if it's convenient for us.
And when you talk about the Scripture referring to defending the cause of the fatherless, caring for the orphan, I don't hear a lot about that in church today.
Right.
But it seems like it's a staple in Scripture, really pure religion taking care of orphans.
Right.
I think the Scripture refers to it that way. In James. Faith Baptist Church, and I know there's others that are doing the same, have gotten on board and are going to focus on a special adoption orphan awareness weekend. And that's going to be coming up on November 8th, 9th, and 10th at Faith Baptist Church. Now, November 3rd, I think, is International Adoption or Orphan Sunday.
Yeah, Christian Alliance for Orphans calls it Orphan Sunday.
And that organization, by the way, you are the regional director with.
Correct. So if there's a local church here that's doing something, whether they actually call it Orphan Sunday, some churches don't like to call it Orphan Sunday because they don't like to use the word orphan, and that's fine. If they want to have something put on the map on the website, orphansunday.org, so they can send it to me, or you can even put it on there yourself. That way, if somebody locally is saying, hey, I want to find a way to get involved and I want to find a church that is doing something, you can go to orphansunday.org. There's a map, and then it'll show all the different churches and their program or their emphasis on what day it is, what time, their service, and things like that. So that's through Christian Alliance for Orphans. But November 3rd, it's usually the first Sunday in November, is kind of like what they consider Orphan Sunday. And it's 48 countries are participating this year, so it's global. Not necessarily on November 3rd. I know Faith Baptist is doing 8th, 9th, and 10th. There's going to be a movie night Friday night where they can come, and there'll be 3 different films shown for all ages. The adult film is going to be Faultless, which is a documentary about the state of foster care in the U.S. and different ways that you can be involved. We'll have a discussion panel afterwards that'll have Dr. Rick Morton, who's the author of Orphanology. The producer of the film will actually be here in town for this, is coming in. Saturday, we're having Run for One Less 5K, and it'll be at Faith Baptist, 3755 North Germantown Road. Did you know that?
Yes.
Oh, that's good. Now that I said it, you know it.
I'll have to Google that.
Yeah, that'll be Saturday morning, 9 o'clock. Registration starts at 8. You can also register online at myfaithbaptist.org. Sunday, we will have some different things going on in the morning service at 9:15. That'll be really cool. It'll give you a really good visual of kind of the state of foster care and orphans worldwide. You'll get to see a lot of that on that Sunday morning. So that'll be good. So that's when they're doing it. But I know in Bangkok, it's going to be this Sunday. Our founders live there, and so they kind of look at this coming Sunday as Orphan Sunday. So it just depends. It's all around this time of the year because November is National Adoption Month.
Also, there's going to be a special display October 27th through November 3rd with pinwheels. Over 1,100 pinwheels will be placed on the front lawn of Faith Baptist Church, representing the number of children in foster care in Shelby County.
Now, depending on what time of year, it kind of ranges anywhere from 1,100 to 1,200, but any given time, there's about that many in foster care in Shelby County. Statewide, there's 8,600, a little over 8,600 kids in the state of Tennessee. There's also 10,000 churches in Tennessee, estimated a little over 10,000. And so if you look at just sheer numbers, you know, they always say there's 147 million orphans. That's the lowest estimate by UNICEF and some of these others. 147 million. I mean, that's kind of a number that we're kind of like, whoa, I mean, like that's a lot, but like, how can I help with that? So at one less, that's how we got our name. We just want to start with one, change of one, a lot like the biblical discipleship model, 1 to 2 to 3, and then multiply from there. And so if you look just at sheer numbers of orphans in the state of Tennessee and churches, it would take one family out of every church in the state of Tennessee. If they took in one child, there would be no more in the foster care system in the state.
Matt, Amanda and Mark's story was connecting with special needs children in this Camp Barnabas. God tugged on their heart and they said, we can do this. What about families who haven't had that experience, but maybe in the back of their mind they thought, well, you know, I've kind of thought about it, but I'm not sure I qualify or know how to go about it. I'm not sure I could wait out the time like Amanda and Mark had to do for 2 years.
Right. I know with the foster care system, with the Department of Children's Services in the state of Tennessee, we applied in November. We started our PATH class. PATH stands for Parents as Tender Healers. And so that's the class the state requires to be a foster parent. 7 weeks long, I think, 1 night a week for 3 hours, or Saturday. They do it on Thursday night and Saturday for 3 hours for 7 weeks to be approved. It's kind of like their training class. That was less than 9 months that it took us as a family. There's also a website of children in the U.S. currently in the foster care system, but both parents' rights have been terminated. They are legally available for adoption. Anytime, if somebody said, hey, we would like to adopt them, they can start their process with them, and it doesn't take as long because you don't have to terminate parents' rights. That website is adoptuskids.org. You can go and they have all the profiles of all these children that are waiting to be adopted literally today.
Amanda, when you talk about adoption, people can't see because this is radio, but you just light up like a Christmas tree. You're pretty excited about this.
Well, I have to say that when God tugs on your heartstrings about something, you find an incredible joy in that. I mean, a few years ago, this was not even something that I would have ever imagined in my life. I have 3 biological children and a stepdaughter. That's 4 kids in the house, and that already qualifies as a big family, but not to God. And when God asks you to do something, you just start doing it, and the joy is there day in and day out.
And we didn't even mention that you're a nurse practitioner by profession.
Yes, so I can see to all the medical needs of my whole family without having to pay all those copays.
That's always good. I can attest to that. I mean, literally, when I walk in the room and see my kids, most of the time they light up. They're excited to see Dad, but not as excited as I am to see them. Like I said, they were both from here in Memphis. Just to see them and the joy that God brings to that. Now, there's hard times. Foster care is hard, I'm not going to lie. There are times where you have court dates and doctor's visits and visits with birth parents and visits with caseworkers. It can get very hectic, and it is hard. I don't want to romanticize adoption or foster care more than it already is. A lot of people think, hey, this is, it's this great thing. We're going to live as one big happy family. And sometimes that's the case, but not always. A lot of times you deal with sensory processing disorders, attachment disorders, and things like that. And so it is very hard. But again, like I said, Scripture doesn't tell us to take care of, the fatherless if it's convenient for you.
And let's talk a little bit more about that, about Christians and the church engaging more in orphan adoption, foster care, and the whole process.
When I was going through the adoption process, Christian Alliance for Orphans, their huge summit was in Nashville. So that's where me and 2 others decided we would make the trip to Nashville and go to this conference. Well, that conference just put us on fire to get the church involved in what we could do for orphan care. So when we got back from that conference, me and Rhonda Sinkfield and Denise Morton and Karen Gaskins all got together, the 4 of us, and we said, okay, what does it look like now that we have all of this information? What are we going to do with it for the church? And what we decided is we would start this ministry just to bring awareness to our congregation on all of the different ways in which you can care for orphans. Because right now, when you say care for orphans, most people go to foster care or adoption, and they're like, that doesn't really look like it works for our family. But there's so many other things, and that's what we're so excited to bring our congregation is there are lots of ways that you can take care of orphans. You don't have to just be the one to adopt or be the one to foster. Help those that signed up to foster, help those that signed up to adopt, and maybe, God willing, that you will be that person in the future. Who knows? But the crux of our ministry is to bring the awareness, and that's what we're hoping through the whole weekend, that we will bring awareness to our congregation, and then it just kind of is like little seeds that go outside that.
And this weekend is open to the entire community, not just members of Faith Baptist Church. The weekend, again, Orphan Awareness Weekend, November 8th, 9th, and 10th. Really, the purpose of this is to raise awareness, has already been mentioned, preserving life and strengthening families. Also, you'll be able to drive down Germantown Parkway and see this wonderful display of over 1,100 pinwheels placed in front of the lawn there of Faith Baptist on Germantown Parkway. Remember, as you drive by, that the 1,100 represented are the number of children in foster care in Shelby County. And I might add, as you drive by, let that be a reminder to pray. Pray that
Yes.
God would connect these children with the right parents, Matt.
Absolutely. Yeah. Another way, Amanda was saying there's other ways to be involved. Like she said, helping a family, respite care is huge for foster parents because there's so many stipulations that go into if the child is in foster care and not with you, if they're staying overnight, how many nights they can stay. If it's not an approved family, you can only have a certain amount of nights. But sometimes, you just need a night out as a couple or something. And so partnering with somebody within your church that says, hey, we want to give these kids consistency and stability because that's what's most important in foster care, I think, for a lot of these children. And so seeing the same family, if you need a babysitter or whatever, helps build a relationship there. And it's almost like discipleship. So like this family may be respite care for us on the weekends. And then as they start to see more and more, maybe they want to do this also.
Yeah.
So then they find another family, that's going to be their respite care. Well, maybe this other family starts to get more and more involved and they want to do it also. And so it just kind of spreads that way. Another good way to find practical help. Johnny will probably love me doing this, but Johnny Carr has a book out called Orphan Justice. Each chapter is a different issue within orphan care and trafficking, orphan care or orphans and racism, orphans and HIV. That's, a big one. And so each chapter is something different. And at the end of each chapter, he says what anybody can do. There's 3 things. Anybody can do this, and he'll say you can be involved in the ministry in your church. Many can do this, and it has something a little more involved, and then he'll say few can do this, which may be to actually adopt, or each one gets a little more time consuming, involves a little more effort, but there's 3 different ways you can be involved in that area at the end of every chapter. It's a great book, great resource, very practical.
Now, also, Friday night, November 8th, will be the movie night. There's going to be free pizza, free movie for all ages, age-appropriate movies, sharing about adoption and orphan care. They'll be shown Despicable Me for children, Lost and Found Family for teenagers, and Faultless for adults. And as you mentioned, Jonathan Good is the producer of Faultless. He'll be there to participate in a panel discussion. And then on Saturday, November 9th, get your running shoes laced up for the 5K Family Fun Run Walk, 9 o'clock, benefiting Oneless. I like to see it. Brother Danny Sinkville is going to participate. He's a.
I think he is.
He's a half marathoner now.
I know.
So
I
he
know.
should come out and participate. Now you can register for the 5K at myfaithbaptist.org. The cost is only $25 or $20 for foster and adoptive families.
We wanted to give a small discount for people that are already
That's
involved.
great. You also have a Facebook page.
Correct.
And there's a website too.
My Faith Baptist, there'll be, as the things scroll across on the main page, there's one there that says click here for more information on the Run for One Less. And you can click there and it'll take you to the page to register. Or you can register Saturday morning starting at 8 o'clock.
But also you have a...
Oh, One Less. Yes, it is onelessministries.org.
This has been fantastic. I want to have you guys to come back. We need to do this periodically to bring listeners up to date, connect, maybe bring some foster parents and maybe some
Absolutely.
kids too that are in the program.
And if anybody from this area or knows any connections to the Nashville area, this is a small plug for us, but we have our benefit dinner November 7th in Nashville. That'll be a great night. We're going to have George Dennehy as a guest speaker. He is in his early 20s. He was adopted from Romania by an American family. He's like one of 6 adopted kids. He was born without any arms, weighed 9 pounds at a year and a half old. Basically, he'll tell you he was left for dead. He now plays the guitar, he drives, he plays the piano, all with his feet. And so he's going to be our guest speaker, and Mercy Me will be our musical guest. So that's November 7th at Rocketown in Nashville. So you can go to onelessministries.org and you'll find more information there if anybody's interested in that.
Matt Nason, Amanda Price, thank you for what you both do for Christ's Kingdom related to orphan and adoptive care, foster care, all that you do. Thanks for sharing today on Mid-South Viewpoint.
Thank you.
Thank you, Byron.
Friends, that's all the time we have on this edition of Mid-South Viewpoint. I do appreciate you stopping by. I'm Byron Tyler. Hey, we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Mid-South Viewpoint. If you'd like to join the conversation, you can email us. Our address is wcrv@botradionetwork.com. This has been Mid-South Viewpoint, another Christian news and information feature from Bot Radio Network 640 AM.